Minister Ng Eng Hen.
Madam Speaker, I think all of us can agree that the members' speeches have been quite helpful in fleshing out in greater detail the growing threat in the digital domain, which Singapore and indeed all countries will face. I must say I was very impressed with every speech. Members did their research, have extensive knowledge, way above the average citizen. They gave details of attacks, digital attacks elsewhere, and how other militaries or agencies are addressing these threats and the difficulties faced. I think perhaps the first order of the day is to recruit some of them into the digital intelligence service. So don't be surprised if you get your SAF 100. But in the interest of disclosure and to make sure that we don't perpetuate scams, if you do get one after this, please know it's not from me and don't answer it. Let me laud members for their efforts and thank them for supporting the bill. There has been unanimous agreement that just as we do in the air, land, and sea, the SAF missions must also protect Singapore against digital threats. The issue is how the SAF does this, and in relation to the DIS, the questions can be summed up in 4 areas. First, why a formal service of fourth to add to the Army, Navy, and Air Force? Second, how will the DIS meet manpower challenges given our constraints and demands for IT-related skills? Third, how will the DIS and the SAF work with partner organizations such as the Home Team and CSA to optimize our digital defenses? And fourthly, how will the DIS guard against excesses and abuse of its powers and capabilities? I think there are 4 important areas, so let me address them in turn. Mr. Donwy asked about our considerations in deciding for formal fourth service. And this indeed was a critical issue that the MINDEF and SAF leaders looked extensively for some time. At the end of it, 2 main reasons led to this decision: manpower and mission mindset. The manpower issue for the DIS is indeed a serious challenge, and I think almost all members alluded to it. Mr. Alex Yam, Mr. Gerald Yam, Mr. Desmond Chu, Mr. Donwy, Mr. Henry Kwek, Mr. Sharil Taha, Mr. Sean Huang, and Mr. Zulkarnain. They've highlighted this and given us good suggestions for recruitment, and we'll study their proposals seriously. But first things first, forming a formal fourth service on par with the Army, Navy, and Air Force is the best footing for the DIS to attract the right type of people it needs. It provides their new entrants and existing staff career paths and progressions on par with the Army, Navy, and Air Force, including for those with the aptitude to be Chief of Service and even to the Chief of Defense Force. And once formed, it puts the onus on the DIS leaders to fight for their fair or unfair share of talent they need. And I completely agree with members of this House that indeed there is a global demand for these type of skills, but this is healthy competition between the services first, and then for the SAF to compete with the rest of organizations that need that kind of talent. For soldiers and personnel who join the DIS, there will be a dedicated digital vocation, which will develop experts in competencies such as software engineering, app development, data science, AI, cloud architecting, among others. Talents in these fields will be eligible for top-tier SAF scholarships. Compensation, as members have supported, will be benchmarked against industry norms and regularly reviewed. The formation of the DIS will boost their recruitment drives. Already, we have our first SAF scholar who applied and was selected to join the DIS. I met her last week during the presentation ceremony. I joked with her that we have awarded her the scholarship on the assumption, because the DIS hasn't been formed yet, because you haven't passed the bill, on the assumption that Parliament approves the bill and that the President assents. I told her, well, if Parliament or the President doesn't do what we hope they do, we'll have to deploy her elsewhere. She is doing law at Oxford, And I think perhaps if Mr. Vikram Nair wait for a couple of years, she may be able to give him the questions that he asked about law and international relations. Just like other services, and perhaps with even more challenges, the DIS must ensure that it provides an attractive proposition for job seekers. It must provide job security, a good working environment, and advancement opportunities. But as members have here pointed out, because it serves a higher calling, it must also bring in people with the right values and commitment and the mission mindset. And as Mr. Gerald Giam, Mr. Alex Yam, and Mr. Saha reminded us, we need to be very security conscious. They are guardians of our secrets, and I agree with you. But this mission mindset was the second key reason for our decision to form a fourth service. In its current configuration, the C4I community is a supporting force. It supports the overall mission of the SAF and that of the Army, Navy, and Air Force. The C4I community will continue to perform these supporting roles for other domains. But with the DIS as a formal service, it is now also directly responsible and accountable to protect the cyber domain against external aggressors. As cyber warriors there, they are the frontline troops. This mindset shift is crucial for the SAF as it builds the DIS. And I think this was the broader theme which member Sean Huang alluded to. As a trained pilot, he knew to ask important strategic and tactical questions about missions for the DIS and the key response for effective outcomes, whether for DIS personnel, soldiers, sailors, or airmen, is the mission mindset. So I think the quick answer to Mr. Vikram Nair's question whether it could be a civilian chief, I would say no. You need a military man in a uniform to have a military mindset. Mr. Zulkarnain, Mr. Don Wee, and Dennis Tan asked about misinformation warfare and whether foreigners could be part of this force. I think not. Singaporeans must, just like air, land, and sea, will be the core elements of this fourth service, but obviously there will be services that they can outsource to third-party contractors. But I agree with you, we have to be very careful even when we do that. There were other questions related to NS-men and also whether soldiers in the DIS will be trained and deployed differently compared to Air, Navy, and Air Force. Mr. Alex Yam asked about women, whether they could join as volunteers. Women can join as regulars. I would like more women to join this if they are up to it. My broad answer is that the certain modules will remain common. Without the right military values and mission mindset, there is a limit in using any individual soldier, no matter how talented he or she is. But if someone serving national service or a regular has the aptitude and right attitude, I agree that such an individual can do more in the DIS, even if his attributes are not best suited for physical combat. In fact, we've already started this. The Cyber NSF scheme, which members alluded to, provides training in threat monitoring and assessment for NSFs to become cyber operators during their 2-year full-time national service. Selected ones with leadership aptitude may be selected to become cyber specialists in a 3-year or 4-year undergraduate work-learn program where they will perform specialized roles such as incident response, cyber forensic, malware analysis, and penetration testing. Members have asked about the sizing of the DIS. I mentioned before in this House that it will grow organically from the current MIO, and at steady state, I think likely to be 2 or 3 times that. Our digital defense network is multi-layered. I agree with members that no single ministry can do it alone. Broadly, the DIS will be external-facing against potential aggressors, while the Home Team and the CSA deal with threats internally. But as MPs have pointed out, the cyber arena is much more porous than the physical domain. Mr. Darrell David, Mr. Desmond Chu, Mr. Henry Craig, Mr. Sharil Taha, Mr. Sean Huang, Mr. Zulkarnain, and Mr. Gerald Giam asked how the DIS will organize itself and also complement and work with other relevant government agencies. Let me give a practical answer. Our agencies know that they cannot work in silos lest the cyber attackers exploit gaps or poor coordination. Interagency sharing of information, coordination, and cooperation already exists. Our counterterrorism efforts have taught us valuable lessons about WOG responses. And I cite this because it's a very good parallel example of interagency work. So similar to cyber threats, MINDEF SAF is external facing for terrorism, working with foreign agencies to detect terrorists, either individually or their networks that mean to do us harm. So MINDEF set up the Counterterrorism Information Facility to facilitate this work and share that information with external partners and local agencies. MHA addresses the internal threats. For cybersecurity, it will do the same together with the CSA. Such coordination already exists today, so we're not starting on a blank sheet. I can foresee exercises to test and improve multi-agency responses to common cyber threats, just as we do against terrorism. So if you remember, we've had multi-agencies. When it comes to terrorism, I think there are as many as 10 or 11 agencies. We have done exercises in ferry terminals, in Changi Airport, in Southern Waters. And when this new service, the DIS, is formed, it can help build more sophisticated cyber ranges that can add depth and realism for these exercises. I have already announced the setting up of a new digital ops tech center and a state-of-the-art digital training and simulation range. The Digital Ops Tech Center will raise a core of practitioners who will apply their cross-cutting digital skills, such as in software development and artificial intelligence, towards operational outcomes for the SAF. This digital range will provide a rich simulation environment for digital training and will host bilateral and multilateral exercises to bring together militaries, industry, and academia to share best practices and insights. Together, the DOTC and the digital range will form a strong foundation from which the DIS will hone our digital defense capabilities and contribute to our digital defense alongside the home team and CSA. I visited such a cyber range, and this was in Latvia, and they are the NATO Center of Excellence. Very impressive setup. You build systems, but there's water systems, power systems, port systems. They work with, and so on and so forth, hospital systems. They work with private practitioners, and they are taught how to defend and obviously to act against penetration attacks. But these are the cyber troops that are raised. The mission and mandate as scope for the DIS to be primarily external facing reduces the risk of abuse and overstepping the SAF's authority. So Mr. Louis Ng's characterization of the DIS as a wide-ranging one is not quite accurate. It is primarily external facing. In daily practice, the rules of engagement will also apply, just as it does to the SAF troops in civilian settings, when they're guarding Changi Airport, Jurong Island, or when they're deployed to deal with terrorist attack or riots. The rules of engagements are spelled out ex ante to reduce the risk of abuse. I was piqued by members' grand vision for the DIS because it's not yet formed. Some said that we should commercialize our successes and that we should share our secrets and capabilities with other agencies. I thank you for your confidence and hope, and we'll try to meet your expectations. Let me now address the questions on proposed changes to the disciplinary processes and penalties under the military justice system. Mr. Louis Ng asked if abetment will be an offense that may be compounded. It will depend on the actual offense being abetted. For offenses such as those under the Penal Code, like abetting the assault of a superior officer, which I mentioned in my first speech, the maximum penalty is actually increased to 7 years imprisonment to align with the Penal Code and is not compoundable. For the abetment of lesser offenses, I think this was mentioned by Dennis Tan as well, MINDEF is open to allowing composition. Currently, if a soldier abets, for example, Currently, if a soldier abets another into defaulting on IPPT, say by encouraging him to default or willfully misleading him with inaccurate information on his IPPT requirements, both would have been charged. With the proposed amendments, both would have committed an offense which may be compounded. There was a question asked whether, compared to summary trials and compounded offenses, whether it will be on your personal record. The current system is that for all STs, it's on your record. So it's very interesting when people discharge, we see all the offenses, maybe some committed even 20, 30 years ago for minor infractions. I think it's a balance between what we need to maintain military discipline and what the organization needs. And over time, I think we found a new balance. So Mr. Dennis Tan asked whether, and I think Mr. Louis Ng asked which specific offenses will be put in the personal record and which ones won't. I would say broadly, our most common offenses are IPPT infractions and smoking in non-designated areas. If members push very hard, I will try to keep that on the personal record, but I think not. Probably we will not keep that on. But if he repeatedly misses an IPPT or purposefully goes against the superior's order not to smoke in that area, that's a very different kind of situation. Mr. Ng asked whether it was a discharge and acquittal. It again depends on whether the charge against the offense. In all cases referred to an authorized composition officer, no charge is preferred. Once the composition sum is paid, no further proceedings are to be taken against the accused for that alleged offense, as reflected in the proposed Section 79A4 of the SAF Act. Mr. Louis Ng also asked if the public prosecutor will provide directions for how authorized composition officers should exercise their composition powers. For military offenses, the jurisdiction comes under the chief military prosecutor, who will ensure that compounded officers are broadly aligned to the civil justice system, but taking into account the need for military discipline. For increased fine limits, Mr. Ng is broadly accurate that the fine limits under Section 118 have increased significantly. However, Sections 68 to 72 will be amended for higher fine limits, but to different degrees. Even with the increase in fine limits, it remains for the military courts and disciplinary officers to assess the specific circumstances of the case and to decide on the appropriate fine to impose. We're just raising the limit, but the powers are still theirs. MINDEF and SAF has established guidelines on fine amounts based on offense severity and rank of the offender, and will adjust these guidelines as he asked for with the amendments take effect. Mr. Ng asked whether the military court will consider the impact of the preceding civil proceedings and any sentences served by the accused for civil-related offenses when imposing a sentence for the military offense. The short answer is yes. Before preferring charges against the serviceman, in the military court, MINDEF will assess all available information and findings which may be relevant, including but not limited to the findings and sentences by the civil court in related civil proceedings. Mr. Daryl David and Mr. Dennis Tan asked about the environmental impact and public security of military maneuvers in catchment areas. I feel a bit embarrassed about this amendment. I'll tell you why. We're just regularizing what all of us as NS men have gone through. All of us, I think, have been into Mandai Reservoir, Kranji Reservoir. Some got lost, maybe. Thankfully, I didn't, or maybe I helped somebody get lost, never mind. But we had an agreement with the PUB Act, I think as far back as in the 90s, to train there. All of us have done it. But we're regularizing it to say that now we can only exercise if PUB says we can. So that's just regularizing it. People ask about environmental impact from such training. We've been doing it for 40 over years, and in very strict guidelines. They protect our catchment area, water especially. Biodiversity, there have been environmental impacts done from time to time, but we leave it to the agencies. But I want to sound a word of caution. We don't have much terrain to train, and the SAF will take precaution. But if we say that, oh, your training can affect, as Mr. Daryl David says, one of 9 particular fauna or flora, we may have very limited land to train in. So please bear that in mind when you're pushing to protect biodiversity, as all of us want to. But there is a balance to be struck. let me conclude. Madam Deputy Speaker, the substantive change in this bill is the setup of the fourth service. The three services of the SAF were established in 1972 with the enactment of the SAF Act. So 50 years on, the amendments today bring to existence a fourth service. The DIS positions the SAF and the Singapore to better deal with cyber threats today and into the future. It provides the SAF with the right structure and emphasis to continue building a full suite of capabilities that can protect Singapore's sovereignty and independence, whether on land, sea, in the air, and in the digital domain. Once again, let me thank members who have spoken on the bill and for their support. Madam, I beg to move.
Mr. Gerald Giam.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I just have one clarification for the Minister. The Minister said that the DIS will compete with other organizations for tech talent. I'm concerned that this would further exacerbate the talent crunch in the private sector, especially for SMEs who don't have the who can't provide the same salary scales, the pay scales as, let's say, the government or MNCs. Besides scholarships, what is MINDEF's plan for increasing the pipeline for tech talent in Singapore to feed into the DIS and other organizations? For example, will MINDEF be working with MOE to help our IHLs increase their Singaporean intake for IT-related majors?
Minister for Defence.
Well, let me thank Mr. Giam for the reminder. When I said that the formation of the fourth service, the DIS, should compete with the other services, is not a signal to Chong, you know. They will have a budget to work with. They have to be attractive. But that's the reality. We say that the DIS is important, and we say manpower is important. And with the formation of the DIS, it puts it on somewhat more equal footing, but they will have to compete. But I agree completely with Mr. Giam, and I think others spoke about it, that we are acutely short of these talents, and we'll have to grow the overall pie or find ways of being efficient. And that I completely agree, and yes, the answer is that we will work with other agencies, and I hope, and not hope, that it is a task of the commanders to make it attractive, to grow the pie, to bring people in.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. As many as are of the opinion, say aye. Aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Singapore Armed Forces and Other Matters Bill.
Committee stage, what day?
Now, Madam, I beg to move that Parliament will immediately resolve itself in the committee on the bill.
The question is that Parliament will immediately resolve itself into a committee on the bill. As many as are of the opinion, say aye. Aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is that clauses 1 to 34 stand part of the bill. As many as are of the opinion, say aye. Aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Bill to be reported. Minister for Defence.
Madam, I beg to report that the bill has been considered in committee and agreed to without amendment.
Third reading, what day?
Now, Madam, I beg to move that the bill be now read a third time.
The question is that the bill be now read a third time. As many as are of the opinion, say aye. Aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Singapore Armed Forces and Other Matters Bill. Item 2, Constitution of the Republic of Singapore Amendment Number 2 Bill, second reading.
Minister for Defence.
Madam, I beg to move that the bill be now read a second time. Madam Deputy Speaker, The proposed amendments to Article 22K of the Constitution of the Republic of Singapore will allow the President to exercise the discretionary powers in the appointment of the new Chief of Digital and Intelligence Service in the same way that the President does in appointment of the Chiefs of the Air Force, Army and Navy. This bill is related to the Singapore Armed Forces and Other Matters Bill, which the House has debated and passed for the establishment of the Digital Intelligence Service. Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Pursuant to Article 5(2) of the Constitution, a vote is taken to ascertain that the second reading of the bill is supported by the votes of not less than 2/3 of the total number of elected and non-constituency MPs, which is 63 members. Clerk, ring the bell, the division bells. Sergeant at Arms, lock the doors. Before I proceed to start the electronic voting, may I remind members that they are to be seated at their designated seats and should only start to vote when the voting buttons on their armrests start to blink. The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Take a vote. You may now begin to vote, and may I remind members to depress their vote buttons firmly in order to register their vote in the system. Members are advised to check that their names are registered according to their vote indication when the voting results are shown on the display screen. Before I proceed to declare the results of the vote, are there any members who wish to claim that his or her vote has not been displayed or displayed incorrectly on the screens? I will proceed to declare the voting results now. There are 75 ayes, 8 noes, 0 abstentions. The second reading of the bill has been carried by the votes of not less than 2/3 of the total number of elected and non-constituency MPs.
Constitution of the Republic of Singapore Amendment Number 2 Bill.
Committee stage, what day?
Resolve itself to the committee.
The question is that Parliament will immediately resolve itself into a committee on the bill. As many as of the opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is that clauses 1 and 2 stand part of the bill. As many as of the opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, say no. No. They want to register. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Bill to be reported. Minister for Defence.
Madam, I beg to report that the bill has been considered in committee without amendments.
Third reading, what day?
Now, Madam.
The question is that the bill be now read a third time. Pursuant to Article 5(2) of the Constitution, a vote is taken to ascertain that the third reading of the bill is supported by the votes of not less than 2/3 of the total number of elected and non-constituency MPs, which is 63 members. Clerk, ring the division bells. Sergeant at Arms, lock the doors.
The doors are locked, madam.
You may now begin to vote. May I remind members to depress their vote buttons firmly in order to register their votes in the system. Members are advised to check that their names are registered according to their vote indication when the voting results are shown on the display screens. Okay, can. Okay, I will call out later. Before I proceed to declare the results of the vote, are there any members who wish to claim that his or her vote has not been displayed or displayed incorrectly on the screens? MOS Gan Xiao Huang. Okay. Minister Shanmugam. Okay. Any other members? I will proceed to declare the voting results now. There are 75 ayes, 8 noes, and 0 abstentions. The third reading of the bill has been carried by the votes of not less than 2/3 of the total number of elected and non-constituency MPs.
Constitution of the Republic of Singapore, Amendment Number 2 Bill.
Deputy Leader.
Madam Deputy Speaker, on behalf of Leader, I beg to move that at its rising today, Parliament do stand adjourned to a date to be fixed.
The question is that at its rising today, Parliament do stand adjourned to a date to be fixed. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that Parliament do now adjourn.
The question is that Parliament do now adjourn.